Why you say atheist values are incompatible with a world without God? Why can't we create our own subjective morality where we can base our values off of and still be nice to people, still be kind, and yes.
Absolutely correct. You can be an atheist and be nice and kind and create your own values. And that's exactly what all of my atheist friends do. And I respect them for it, because I agree with their values. And their values, many of them agree with Christ, which I really appreciate. My simple point is this. If you create your own values, next week, if you embrace the opposite of those values, you are not wrong. You're not right today and wrong next week. Because all those values are subjective. I don't think you can live that out. I don't think if I hurt you badly enough, you're simply going to say to me, well, from my perspective, what you did to me was wrong, but I understand that it's all relative, and go ahead and do it again to me. I don't think you're going to look at the abuse of an innocent child and say, well, from my perspective, that's wrong, but I understand that it's all just subjective. It's all just a matter of taste. Do you like broccoli or cauliflower? Do you like abusing a child or respecting a little child? It's all relative. No, you're going to live as if the abuse of an innocent child is absolutely objectively wrong. Loeb was a very intelligent teenager back in the 1920s. He had a friend, Leopold, who at the age of 17 was accepted to Harvard Law School. These two teenage guys decided to perform the perfect crime. They got a neighbor, put him in their car, beat him to death, put acid on him to try and totally disfigure him. The police caught him. But they both came from very wealthy families, who hired the best legal team they possibly could, with Clarence Darrow, the tremendously talented lawyer, leading the team. And in court, Clarence Darrow said, whoa, 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 ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Leopold went to a very fine school, is enrolled in a very fine school, where he's been being taught Nietzsche, and that if there is no God, it's all relative and it really doesn't matter. Certainly, we're not going to execute Mr. Leopold because he goes to a very fine school, accepts what the professor says about Nietzsche, and goes out and lives it out. And Clarence Darrow got Leopold off of the death sentence. He was being horribly consistent in his thinking.
It's just, like, why can't that be a product of, like, biological empathy? Like, why, like, the reason why we find things wrong, why can't it just because it's some instinct that we feel? Why does it have to be something from God?
It's the human mind that creates right and wrong if there is no God, which means right and wrong are totally relative. The only way there can be a moral absolute, an objective moral, is if there is a mind prior to the human mind who defines right and wrong. And that is exactly what Jesus Christ in the Bible insists, that God is an eternal being whose character throughout eternity has defined right and wrong, justice and injustice, good and evil.
I assume this means, like, there's some level of free will.
Yes.
So, like, for example, how do you manage having, like, an omnipotent God or, for example, let's just say, do you believe that, like, certain actions, events, and circumstances will make you believe in God?
No.
So it has to be, but aren't there things which, like, things have happened to religious people which have made them more inclined to believe in God?
More inclined? What do you mean?
Like often people, when they say, oh, I believe in God, I believe in God because of this verse or this experience that I've had.
Right.
These ideas which have been brought on by external circumstances.
Sure.
So is that necessarily, like, didn't God help them believe in himself? Like, how much of it is it really the person's choice?
Okay. All of us are confronted by the fact that you don't get order out of chaos. But if there is no God, every atheist and agnostic that I know of believes in a miracle. That you do get order out of chaos. You get order out of chaos by chance. That's a miracle, guys. But if you're an atheist or an agnostic, you have no miracle worker. You see, all of my thinking is really simple when it comes down to reason. If there is no God, no creator, then my rational mind comes from the irrational, ultimately, push it back far enough. So that's another miracle. To believe that the rational mind comes from the irrational or the non-rational is a miracle. But if there is no God, you have no miracle worker. Wow. You see, I live in a world where life comes from life. Plant life comes from plant life. Animal life comes from animal life. Human life comes from animal life. But if there is no God, ultimately life comes from non-life. That's a miracle. But if there is no God, there's no miracle worker. You see, I live in a world where thinking it through simply for me is, I experience love.
I forget who was the author who said this, but or the person who said this, but they said that atheists believe in, what is it, like 7 different miracles. One of them is not, I forget what they all are, but one of them is non-life. No, life comes from non-life. That was like the big one. Thought, I think he used thought came from non-thought. Yeah, I think one of them had to do with thought. I don't remember the full thing, but Yeah, that I think, yeah, that like to think that nothing comes from something is insane to think. You should never think that something comes from nothing. Way to go, Cliff. You got him.
If there is no God, love comes from matter, from inanimate matter, evolved to a higher order. Sir, that's impossible. You can't have this intangible, non-material value of love coming out of matter and energy. I live in a world where everybody who...
Also, I'm gonna inject my personal opinion that, wait, what speed am I on real quick? I'm gonna go a little faster. Also, I'm gonna inject my personal opinion of, I think God, like love is, I think, purely a like spiritual emotion. Like it is not like, I feel like love itself is not like other emotions. It does not carry itself like other emotions. And what we do in true love, like what we do for like actual true love, is not it is not inclined for humans. It is the opposite of humans. Like, right, there's no greater love than to die for your brothers and sisters. So things like that, I just feel like it is the opposite of what we're taught to do as humans, right? Or is the opposite of our instincts. True love is the opposite of instinct. I think Ephesians 5 talks about how a husband needs to be willing to die for his wife as Christ died for the church. Things like that. So yeah, love, it is not it is not like your average emotion. It is not like a regular emotion like rage or sadness or liking something. It's not a normal emotion.
who I observe, be the atheist, agnostic, theist, whatever, believes there's some type of meaning to life. Well, guys, if there is no God, meaning comes from matter. That's the whole story. See, so I'm convinced that God has left more than enough evidence for any thinking person to believe in some type of God.
I mean, through like different principles in science, we sort of like prove whatever. Like there's evidence of life originating from matter. There is evidence of order coming from chaos. Through like, you know, whatever physical principles that exist. So like we can have systems where there are like, it's more ordered in some areas and less ordered in other areas. That's just how like probability works. And so I still find that like, given that we only know the world we live in, it's sort of hard to claim like this is a miracle or this is not, right? We have like a sample set of one. And so making like observations based off of this seems sort of like a flawed in that. So I mean, my main question is like, how do we tell that something is a miracle? How do we really figure out that this is something that cannot be possible without God?
Russell Calburn is professor of experimental physics at Cambridge. And Russell Calburn says, you cannot work in science and not be struck by the amazingness of the universe. A good day in the lab is a cause for worship because you come out of it seeing God's creation just a little bit more clearly than when the day started. I like that. See, there's no contradiction between hard...
I'm sorry. Did he have that on paper? He's just so ready, bro. Oh my goodness. It's crazy. Bonkers. Love it.
Science and belief in God. Because hard science is a study of process. Belief in God is a study of the mind behind the process, the creator. I'm a big fan of one of your faculty members, Ian Hutchinson, here at MIT. Ian Hutchinson is professor of nuclear science and engineering right here at MIT. Ian puts it beautifully when he says, when I became a follower of Christ while a student at Cambridge University, quite a few of my friends said or implied I was committing intellectual suicide. 35 years later, it does not feel like suicide. See, both Hutchinson and Calburn understand that the issue of God is not a scientific question. Not to offend any of you guys, but it's not a scientific question. The question of God is more a philosophical, ethical, theological question. And this whole idea that science contradicts belief in God is a lie. It is a total farce, a total lie. The whole idea that unless I can scientifically prove it, it's not true, there's another lie. Please scientifically prove to me that unless you can scientifically prove something, it's not true. No, that's a philosophy. The philosophy that says unless you can scientifically prove it, it's not true, is not science, it's philosophy. So be very careful that you don't mix science and faith in God in an intellectually dishonest way.
Wouldn't you like?
I'm gonna pause it. I saw a video where he was saying, where Cliff, I thought that was a good one. He didn't use it this time. I thought you might have used it right here. But he said, please prove to me that your thoughts, that you can like prove your own thoughts. Like you physically can't prove your own thoughts, right? And you can't, yeah, scary.
Wouldn't you say that by God interfering with our lives,
yes,
this like in a way lessens our free will, given that he knows the product of all our actions? As like him taking a certain action would make it so that we are less inclined to see him, or like given like we're born in the circumstances we are, right? Like or like people were raised learning different things. These these different ideas that they have learned from external circumstances may work with God, they may not work with God. And so, given that these external circumstances might affect how they believe in God, doesn't this prove a contradiction of free will?
Okay, I don't think so. Because I am convinced that regardless of how powerful those external influences are, you don't have to succumb to them. Two children grow up in the same home with a horribly alcoholic father. One child becomes an alcoholic. Why are you an alcoholic? Because dad was an alcoholic. The other child grows up and does not touch alcohol. Why do you do that? Because I saw my dad, he was an alcoholic. So to keep on pushing it back into, well, there were certain influences that determined that I had to be this way, God, you can't live your life that way. If I walk around the corner of your student building and a professor with a little bit of hair, with a big stack of books under his arms, comes walking around towards me, as soon as I see the guy, I haul back and hit him as hard as I can. I'm hauled into a court of law, and the judge says, Cliff, what on earth were you doing? And I said, well, it's real simple, Your Honor. When I was a little kid, my dad, who had a little bit of balding hair, would take a big book and smack me over the head with it. And when I saw that MIT professor, he just so reminded me of my dad that I had to smack him. The judge is going to say, Cliff, I'm really sorry you had that kind of warped father, but you are still responsible for the way you smashed that MIT professor. I don't care how much he reminded you of your abusive father. The whole legal system in the United States is based on free will. And sir, my experience in life is I have a free will. I have been very rude to a bunch of obnoxious university students over the past 45 years, and I've had to apologize to them. I was at Brown, up in Providence, and or down, I guess, from here, down in Providence, and this Brown student comes walking down the pathway. Oh, here's another one of them narrow-minded, bigoted, conservative Christians out here telling us all that we need Jesus. I said, oh yeah? And here's another one of them bigoted Ivy League students who hasn't heard a word I've said, has just stereotyped me. Give me a break. Fortunately, the Brown student comes back and sits right down in front of the crowd. And after a few minutes, I felt so guilty over having teed off on the guy. I looked him in the face and said, man, I teed off on you. Would you please forgive me? And this guy looked me in the face and says, yeah, Cliff, I forgive you. And we continued on. But I can promise you, sir, I didn't have to tee off on that guy. He did not make me tee off on him. I chose to. And since that time, I've grown and Christ has changed me, for which I'm very grateful. But it's been a challenging process for me to control my temper. And I don't have to control my temper. I can let it rip. And I've done that too often, to be honest with you.
Oh, wow.
You said at the beginning,
All right, that's it for this video. I'm gonna come back to it later.